Hi guys, Jamie Humphries here for Six String Alliance, and in today's video we're going to take a look at another of my recent collaboration videos with Guitar Techniques magazine and Ibanez Guitars, where I looked at the style of Joe Satriani. In this video we are looking at his use of exotic scales, modes and odd time signatures. So recently I took part in a collaboration with Guitar Techniques magazine. I've been writing for Guitar Techniques magazine on and off since about 1994, 1995. And Jason Sidwell at the magazine reached out to me and said, would I be involved with a feature to celebrate the release of Joe Satriani's latest album, Elephants from Mars, and look at 4 different stylistic pieces composed for tracks looking at his blues style, his hard rock style, his ballad style, plus his use of exotic scales, odd time signatures and modes. Now, when I got involved with the project, I reached out to my friend Dan at Ibanez Germany, who put me in contact with Ibanez Sweden, and eventually ended up getting this guitar from Ibanez Japan. So it's turned out to be a little bit of a collaboration. Huge shout out to Ibanez for getting behind me on the project and supplying me with this beautiful guitar, which is now living in the studio. I've been a huge fan of Ibanez guitars since I was 15, 16 years old, and got my first Ibanez in 1988, which I still have. Had a Steve Vai model, had a floral gem. I've spoken about this before, which I stupidly sold. I had a 1989 model, and I now have a Red Beach, have a Voyager, and now I have a JS. I wish I still had my gem. Maybe one day I will get another gem. Now, like many guitar players, Joe Satriani has had a huge and profound influence and impact on my life as a musician. I first discovered Joe in 1986. A friend of mine played me Not of This Earth, and although it was a little off the wall, it was kind of an introduction into that more, guitar orientated instrumental music. It was around the time that my friend also played me Flexible, and before too long I was completely hooked on Joe Satriani and Steve Vai. Now, I had one of those eruption moments. Remember the first time you heard Eruption, you were like, what the hell is that? How is someone doing that on the guitar? And I had the same experience when I heard Surfing with the Alien, when Joe was doing that fast pick tapping. Now, from that point on, I was completely hooked. Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, and I remember going to see Steve Vai with Dave Lee Roth on the Skyscraper tour, and I saw Joe Satriani on the Flying in a Blue Dream tour in 1990. And he had more of an impact on me, I think, than other guitar players. Obviously, Eddie Van Halen has the biggest impact, but these guys were rock stars. You know, Joe Satriani was a working guitar player. He was a guitar tutor, and he had a vision, and he followed his path and achieved his goal. And I've always found that very really inspirational. Now, through doing YouTube, I've met some pretty cool people, and my friends Glenn Fricker, Andy Ferris, Henning Pauley, plus other companies that I've met at 42 Gear Street have all kind of encouraged me to tell my stories. You know, after we've done the videos of hanging out, having a few beers, and the stories start to flow, and they're like, you have to tell these on your channel. I've kind of shied away a little bit from it because it can come off a little bit name-dropping, a bit naff, but I do have a couple of really cool Joe Satriani stories that I thought I would share with you. So 10 years ago, I had the unimaginable phone call, which was from Brian May's people to join a band with Brian May. And I spent about a year and a half touring with him on and off. And that ultimately led to me playing one gig with Queen. Now, during this period, I was still working as a working guitar player, doing my other gigs, working at the ACM, working for Lick Library, and helping to get Guitar Interactive magazine off the ground. And the old editor, Gary Cooper, one day phoned me up and said, can you go to the Hard Rock Cafe in London and interview Chickenfoot? I was like, oh, wow. So I went up there, and when I turned up, it was at a time when I was still a Black Star endorser. I had a Black Star hoodie on, and I'm standing there, everyone's kind of hanging out, and we're just waiting to go in to do the interview. And Sammy Hagar comes up to me, which obviously was like, Sammy Hagar's Van Halen. And he was like, dude, I play Black Star. Do you play Black Star? I said, yeah, I've been using them for many years, you know, just been touring with them. And he said, who have you been playing with? And I said, I've been playing with Brian May, and I just played a gig recently for Freddie Mercury's 65th birthday. And he went, you know Burnt? And I was like, Burnt. That's Roger Taylor's buddy. And it turned out that we had a mutual friend. And he was, Burnt flies us around in a plane. He flies us to gigs. And then Sammy sort of told Michael Anthony's and Joe, this guy knows Burnt, and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, we did the interview, and we all got on really, really well. And at the end, Michael Anthony said to me, would you like to come to the gig tomorrow night? So I said, yeah, I'd love to. So he said, I'll put you on my guest list. So not only have I just been hanging out with Joe Satriani and ex-members of Van Halen, I've now been put on Michael Anthony's guest list. So as you do, you put it on Facebook, on the guest list for Chickenfoot tonight. And so I get a phone call from Pete Malandrone, who is Brian May's guitar tech. He's like, you're going to Chickenfoot tonight? I said, yes, I am. He said, well, Brian's going. Would you meet up with him? So, you know, hang out with him a little bit. I said, yeah, of course I can. So we went to the gig. Afterwards, I met up with Brian, and we ended up going to a little after show. And I walk in with Brian, and Joe Satriani comes over. Brian, you know, they're good buddies. And Brian introduces me and says, this is Jamie. You know, he's my guitar player in a band that we've been doing. And Joe kind of was like, we met yesterday. And I think it kind of reaffirmed, you know, having Brian May introduce me as the guitar player in his band. So me and Joe really hit it off, and we sat down for a while, you know, having a couple of drinks and chatting. And at the end of the evening, Joe said to me, next time I'm in London, let's meet up and let's jam. And I was like, wow, Joe Satriani's just invited me to jam. Thought nothing of it, just thought he was being polite. So cut to a little bit later on, and I'm doing my Guitar Interactive gig, and I get to go up to this event held by Marshall. I think it was celebrating, 40 years, 50 years, something like that. And there was a big concert. So I was in the rehearsal space, and they were bringing in guitar players of Zakk Wylde, members of Motorhead, Free, lots and lots of bands, and I would sit and talk to them about, you know, their experiences of Marshall amps. And they said, we got Joe Satriani. I said, Joe's coming in. Maybe we'll jam. To which one of the people, I won't say who he is, one of the people at Lick Library started to rip it into me. Oh, yes, you know Joe. You're going to go around Brian May's house. Basically just kind of taking the piss out of me a little bit. And I kind of ignored it and said, can't be bothered with this. Every time I'm with this man, it seems to be some kind of hassle. That's another story. Won't go into that. Anyway. In walks Joe, and Joe looks at me, Jamie, what are you doing here? And I said, well, this is my day job. And so we chatted away. He said, I just saw Brian on TV. And we sat down, and he said, what do you want to do? I said, well, we're just going to talk about your experiences of Marshall amps and what they mean to you. He said, okay, well, we've got a couple of amps here. Shall we jam? To which me and Joe launched into a jam. And it was quite funny to look around the room at the shock on the people from Guitar Interactive and Lick Library, all like, oh my God, He's jamming with Joe, frantically trying to get tapes into the cameras to start filming. So there is a video of that on YouTube somewhere. It's not like the greatest jam in the world. I'm playing a little bit of blues rhythm and Joe's playing along with me, but it was still great to actually get to play with him. But then, a few years ago, I got invited to join a tour called Götterdämmerung, and it was like this big multimedia tour, huge movie screen on stage, and it was like a dark fairy tale with Slash, Lemmy, Tom Araya, Grace Jones, Iggy Pop, all of these rock stars, the guy from Queens of the Stone Age. And it was like this dark fairy tale thing. And I was in the band that was on stage playing the soundtrack live, basically. And we went out and did a series of festivals and stadium gigs across Europe. It was an incredible experience. And on the run of shows that I got hired to play on, Henry Rollins was coming out to play his part live. He was like this heavy metal preacher. So we'd be playing Black Sabbath tunes with this huge movie screen with all this imagery and him shouting at the audience in these massive stadiums. It was unbelievable. So we go and do Hellfest and get off the tour bus. We've been driving from northern Spain. Get off the tour bus, go in to get to the dressing room, and opposite us is Joe Satriani's dressing room. It's the year that Joe played at Hellfest. Anyway, ended up meeting up with him. Jamie, how are you? What are you doing here? I'm playing some shows with Henry Rollins. And with that, he invited me to watch the show from the side of the stage. So when you see the footage of Joe Satriani on stage at Hellfest, I'm sitting on the edge of the stage on a flight case. It was just incredible to be invited by him, to be able to watch him at such close proximity, not from the audience, sitting on the side of the stage. Actually, someone wrote to me on Facebook and said that there's a Joe Satriani documentary where at the end, it's after the Hellfest set, and you can see me and Joe chatting backstage. Whether or not, I've never seen it, so I don't know whether it's mistaken identity or if it's actually me. But anyway, that was my Joe Satriani story that I thought I would share with you. So on to today's performance video. On the other performance videos from this series that I shared, haven't really spoken about the track because the magazine was out at the time. There's been a few more issues since then. So I feel enough time has passed that maybe I can discuss the track a little bit. Obviously, click the link in the description where you can purchase a current copy of Guitar Techniques magazine, and also find back issues where you can get the backing tracks and the videos and all the full transcriptions to go along with these pieces that I've been sharing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to discuss a little bit of the mindset and talk through some of the sections just to give you a little bit of a hint of how these tracks came together. Today's gear and the gear that I was using in the performance video, I'm using obviously my brand new Ibanez JS. This is an absolutely fantastic guitar. We have the Damasio Mojo in the bridge, and we have the Sach track in the neck. The thing I love about this is that it has the Edge tremolo system on it. The Edge, I think, is one of the best versions of a Floyd Rose. I've got an original Edge on my 540p and on my Red Beach Voyager. I've also got one on my Yamaha SG that I had put on in the early 90s. I used to work for Ibanez back then and got hold of a replacement trem for my Yamaha, but it's a really responsive trem. A couple of other cool features about this guitar. If you pull the tone pot, then you've got coil tap, and if you pull the volume pot, you've got a high pass filter, so it sort of rolls off some of the low end, which means that when you're playing with like a quite sort of thick, distorted tone, you can clean up the low end. It's really nice for letting your leads really pop out. So I'm plugging directly into my audio interface. I use a UAD Apollo X8, and I am running Amplitube in Cubase 12, and I'm using the Joe Satriani signature package, which is absolutely fantastic. It has 3 different amps. It has the Marshall style Satch model. It has a model of his 5150. There's plus a load of other pedals. But the coolest thing about it is that it has a really authentic model of the Rockman. Now, I actually own a Rockman that's broken. So getting this, the Joe Satriani Amplitube signature package meant that I now have access to that amp. And when you pair that package up with this guitar, I'm just using the two pickups with the coil tap split. For the clean tones, it just has that sound of 80s Joe Satriani. So as well as that clean tone, that iconic clean tone, it does that crunch sound. If I just pop up that high pass filter just to roll off a little bit of the low end. It has that characteristic driven sound that we associate with those early Joe Satriani albums. So well worth checking out that Amplitube package if you are a fan of Sat. Obviously, putting it together with this guitar, you get the whole deal. So just to give you a little bit of background about the track, the performance track that you heard at the front end of this video, the brief for this track was to come up with something that demonstrated Joe's use of exotic scales and modes and odd time signatures. So to start off with, the first portion of the track is in 5/4. Now, I wanted to show a little bit of reference to the Enigmatic Scale. Obviously, there is a song by the same name on Not of This Earth, and I took the same approach as Joe. Now, the Enigmatic Scale is quite an unusual scale. You've got a root and a flat 2. We have a major third, a sharp 4 and a sharp 5, a sharp 6th, major 7th, and a root. So you have this. So it's quite an unusual scale. Now, what Joe, watching an interview with him, what Joe did was that he wrote out the scale and then harmonised it, basically treating every note of the scale as a potential root note to build a series of chords. Now, I was taught about that by my old teacher, Phil Hilborn, back in the early 90s. And obviously from that point on, you could look at any scale you like, treat each note as a root, every other note, and you would build a triad, or if you added a fourth note, some form of extension. So I used the same approach with the Enigmatic Scale. I basically was like, well, if it worked for Joe, maybe it will work for me in terms of being able to come up with some chords. And I came up with this chord sequence. We have, you've got those droning sort of dissonant, with the open E in the top. It really adds a sort of a wincing dissonance, but it sounds really cool. And obviously using the whammy bar as well to scoop into the chords. It has that real sort of 80. And then the second time round, I changed the chords just for a bit of variation. So we have... So if you are experimenting with new scales, this is a really cool way of making music out of them. I think it's a really good thing for you to, practice against drones, like with that Enigmatic Scale. You can appreciate the sound of the intervals by playing against an E drone. And that way you sort of start to get a little bit of a sense of the feel of the scale and the sound of the scale. And then, like I said, treat every note as a potential root note and go every other note so you get a root, third and fifth of some description. For the second half of the verse, I wanted to change the feel a little bit and give it that sort of heavier but 80s sort of experimental sound. I always loved that about Joe's early recordings. They had a certain sound about them thanks to the gear that he was using. So I've gone onto the driven tone on the Rockman model, and we have this series of power chords, these 2-note chords that I came up with. So... and then Okay, put that together. Now, again, I'm just made these power chords from looking at notes within the Enigmatic Scale. And then the second portion of the of the verse riff, if you like, we changed the riff again. So onto the second half of the verse, again, I came up with some more two-note chords just to give some variations to the riffs. You have... Now, I'm also using a 5/4 time signature still for this section, so we're really kind of embracing that sort of early experimental phase of Joe's playing by looking at both exotic scales and different time signatures. So for the chorus section, I went back to the clean tone on the Rockman, and I'm using both the neck and bridge pickups on the JS, and I'm splitting the coil. And I'm using a series of minor 7 add 11 chords and also major 7 add sharp 11. So I'm going from a minor tonality to a Lydian tonality. So you're always changing key. I think the first two chords are the only chords that are diatonic. So as I play the chords, I'm also scooping in with the whammy bar. So it has that real kind of 90s Satriani sound to it, that sort of slightly spacey sound. I really love that style and that approach in Joe's playing. And for the final section, we go back to the 5/4 time signature, and I'm back in that sort of experimental Joe phase where I'm playing a series of shapes with the open strings. Just moving that sort of sus2 shape around, but obviously it's not functioning as a sus2 when we have the other open strings. Plus we're playing against the open low E, so. Okay, so if we then perform that with the scoops. I'm actually planning a lesson on using the whammy bar. I think that's a really cool technique, you know, playing your rhythm. Especially with that really sort of processed 80s clean chorus tone. I should also point out, actually, that the chorus that I'm using is on the Rockman. It just has such a stylistic sound about it. So I really hope you've enjoyed today's video. I've given a little bit more of an insight on the development of the track than I have normally. Basically, the magazine was out, I think, 2 or 3 issues ago, so it's not a current issue. I don't think there was any harm in me just sort of talking a little bit about how I came up with the track and what's going on. Of course, I haven't, divulged too much information. I haven't given you any of the solos or the licks. Click the link in the description where not only you can get the current issue of Guitar Techniques magazine, it's a great magazine, it's been going forever, some great tutors, some really good content in there, but also you can get the back issue where you can get the Joe Satriani issue, exclusive interview with Joe, plus a little bit of an appreciation of Joe section there with some quotes and thoughts from some of the leading guitar players in the world. Also, we have the 4 exclusive mini pieces composed by yours truly, looking at the style of Joe. Like I said, his style is so deep-rooted into me. It's a bit like Van Halen and Brian May. I've listened to Joe Satriani for so long. It was such a pleasure to spend the time putting these songs together and composing them, and I really poured a lot of love into them to make the tracks sound as authentic as possible. all. Huge shout out to Ibanez Japan, my friends at Ibanez Japan, my friends at Ibanez Germany, my friends at Ibanez here in Sweden, Scandinavia. For this wonderful guitar. This is a great guitar. Also, you should definitely check out the Joe Satriani Amplitube signature pack. Put the guitar and that together and you've just got the tone. I'm not doing the hard sell here, by the way. I just really love this combination of the gear. I always find that when I pick this guitar up, I just plug straight into Amplitube because you've got all the tones there. Stay tuned for more videos. We've got one more video in this series that I'll put out very soon. And yeah, if you don't already, please subscribe. That's it from me. Take care. Bye for now.